this is such a common challenge and an important one that actually there just are some things that you and I, Ben, have learned along the way that could help someone. I find the contrast between my beliefs about public speaking now compared to how they were 25 years ago, really struggling, rehearsing and muttering the words over and over again as I shuffled towards having to do this mini talk. However you feel about public speaking, whoever you are listening to this, I promise you, if I can do it, you can. I have found over and over again that it does affect the confidence with which you walk into your opportunity. And over the years, I've had dozens and dozens of people who've fed back to me that they use this now. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This is episode 164. My name's Rob Woods, and this is the show for fundraisers who want ideas and maybe a little dose of inspiration to help you raise more money and really enjoy your job. This time, I'm again joined by my colleague and friend Ben Swart, and we're going to do a slightly different episode in which Ben is going to take the role of interviewer and I'm going to be sharing some ideas in answer to his questions, which we hope will really help you, the listener, with a recurring challenge for many fundraisers out there. Ben, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Rob. And I'm really pleased to be doing this today. Normally, I ask fundraisers how they have achieved great things and then use that in our work. So I'm quite excited to hear your ideas on a topic that most fundraisers and leaders that I talk to, it's often one of the reasons why they get in touch to get help in the first place. So fundraiser, if you are listening to this, today's topic is going to be all about the skill of presenting and talking to a large group of people to try and help them to want to do something else. There's lots of reasons why this is an important skill or thing to get your head round. Rob, you've had a particular set of thoughts on this and why in particular this skill is so important. What would you say?
Yeah, this came to the top of my mind recently because we were doing day 4 of our mastery programs. And it's a lovely day because in the afternoon, one of the things we do is give everyone a chance to reflect on their journey across the 6 months. And people share all kinds of different things that they are now more skillful at, more confident at, certain victories they've had in terms of results in their fundraising. And I give everyone a chance to share those with the group so that we can celebrate with them and for them and take pride in that progress. And several people this time, when I was listening in, and this one person in particular shared a similar thing. And what she said was, there's these other bits of progress as well, and a couple of partnerships where the income has grown and so on. But honestly, one of the things I'm most proud of is in terms of my confidence to go out and do mini presentations to other teams in my charity about specific projects and also in particular just about what corporate partnerships is and what it could be. And that might not seem like a big thing, but really to me, Rob, it is a big thing because I was really struggling with this. It's one of the things that often I would have shied away from. It's not that I've never had to do a talk to some other people, but I rarely enjoyed it. And it is the kind of thing I wouldn't have put my hand up to do. And in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've done 4 of those talks to other teams. And they went actually quite well. So in terms of my short-term goal, more people in my charity now are bought into what I'm trying to do with partnerships fundraising. But also this, in a way, more important thing in terms of my confidence is that this was a scary thing. I took a deep breath and I found a way to do it. And what that's done for my confidence is I realized I could do it again. And actually, what other things did I think I can't do, but actually I could do? It sent that kind of a signal to me because I did the scary thing. So I was reflecting and I remembered just how hard this skill is for many people and remember how hard it was for me early in my career. And then the other catalyst was I'm currently putting together my slides for a talk I'm going to do at the International Fundraising Congress, which happens every year near Amsterdam. And again, I was reflecting, once upon a time, I really struggled with this. And now how fortunate I am that these wonderful conferences invite me to come and do these talks. So it's really quite a shift compared to how I felt about presenting 25 years ago. And also, though, in that same file where I prepare my talks for conferences, I found some notes from when in the past a particular conference has asked me to do coaching or training for their conference speakers before the big conference. And that put me in mind, actually, this is such a common challenge and an important one, that actually there just are some things that you and I, Ben, have learned along the way that could help someone if they are in this boat.
Absolutely. I love those training sheets that you just found. I love that I've witnessed them work. Clearly not just through the IFC, through other things as well.
I guess my first point then, to help the listener, if at some level you struggle to do this particular thing, even just a presentation to another team, let alone a big pitch where the stakes are really high, if you struggle, I think my first point that's helped me is realizing that that's entirely normal to feel that way. Like if this superstar businesswoman in Toronto could feel that way, and half the fundraisers in my program the other week at some level could feel this way, then if you, dear listener, feel the same way sometimes, then it's okay. It's not a surprise. And really, I'm reflecting on 25 years ago. I would struggle so much when I would go in to our team meeting on a Monday morning at the children's charity where I used to work. And all we had to do in the team meeting was, in a minute or so at the beginning of the meeting, share with the other 6 people in the team what we were working on at the moment. That's all we had to do, 2 or 3 things. And most of my teammates appeared to just open their notebook and off the top of their head talk about what they were doing. I found it so difficult and so stressful to do that in kind of an informal presentation of sharing my thoughts with 6 other people, that I would fret about it on a Sunday night. And most of my journey in on a Monday morning, I'd be making notes in a notebook and rehearsing in my head, even as I was walking to the building, rehearsing almost word for word what I was going to say in that 60-second mini, or to me, it felt like a presentation. To our other people, they were just talking with the team. Some of our listeners will think about that and thinking, well, that is kind of an absurd, an extreme way to approach it. I wasn't doing it on purpose. Honestly, I found it that difficult that my coping mechanism was just to prepare that carefully. I guess I'm saying this because to me, that's an amazing contrast to my job for the last 19, 20 years has been speaking for a living. I get excited when I'm invited to go and speak at a conference to 100 or more people, to do keynote speeches and, sometimes a training session to 30, 40 people for a day and so on. We do these master classes now at Brightspot. I get genuinely excited about the chance, how lucky I am to do that now. And I'm not making that up. It's literally how I feel about it. I find the contrast between my beliefs about public speaking now compared to how they were 25 years ago, and really struggling, rehearsing and muttering the words over and over again as I shuffled towards having to do this mini talk. I've not actually shared that story on the podcast before because I don't feel it's been relevant, but I'm doing it now just to help you, listener, however you feel about public speaking. If I can manage to make progress in this area, I'm not saying you need to want to speak at conferences, but if I can make progress in this area, whoever you are listening to this, and currently your rational brain might feel that this is not for you, you can't. This is just not a skill that's learnable. I promise you, if I can do it, you can. And I hope that in the rest of this interview, we can share a couple of other practical things that can help you make progress if you'd like to.
Thank you, Rob. And if I were making headlines, then it would be Rob was once like how you feel now or how you might have felt. I think that's really valuable. I'm interested, Rob. Clearly, there are many things that have helped you and you've noticed helped others and helped us to help others win pitches and things. What are some things that people can do to begin to change the way they view this, what they do, and hopefully their results too? What's some ideas?
Sure. As with many things, my starting point isn't so much technical and practical. It's really about connecting to reasons as to why you might want to, why it's worth the effort. a key step for me was going on a brilliant course to do with presentation skills with an excellent trainer called Bernard Ross from the Management Centre. And towards the end of the course, I think it was 2 or 3 days, in which there'd been lots of excellent content and technique, and I'd made a little progress. The key thing that helped me in the months following that, partly it was the techniques I could then practice, but so much more of it was he had helped me connect to wanting to get good at this. And I remember writing in my notebook that I really, really want to get better at this skill now. And definitely it wasn't plain sailing. Definitely it was sometimes uncomfortable or stressful, but a light had switched on that I really wanted to have the skill to be able to help 5 people at a time, 10 people at a time or more, long before I was at that point. And for the listeners who would like to go on this journey and make progress in this area, that to me is the starting point. It's right now a reason why fundraising might be difficult for you is very often because some of your colleagues don't quite understand legacies and that massive opportunity, or what corporate partnerships or major donor fundraising really are about, and the need for example, patience, but also buy-in from people elsewhere in the organization. Fundraising's so hard if you on your own or you and your team are just trying to do the good work and other people in the organization don't get it. Now, of course, one way to help them tune in more is one-to-one, have cups of coffee with your colleague in that other team. And that's excellent advice that, for instance, Paul Mackenzie was giving in an earlier episode of this show. But time is precious. If and when you can book for 10 or 20 minutes to go along to a team meeting that your colleagues in the policy team or the communications team or the service delivery team are doing, and in 20 minutes help all 3 of them or all 10 of them, whatever it might be, really understand what a wonderful opportunity this could be for them as well as you. If they work with you in finding contacts they might know at any of these 10 companies, or what we might be able to do differently that increases our chances of this massive gift coming in, or more people making pledges. If you can help groups at a time, it's just the numbers of it. You become way more efficient and effective at first getting buy-in to your current fundraising project or people understanding how you fundraise, and in due course the wider sector if you're interested in doing that. And of course sometimes maybe presenting to win a pitch and so on. Sometimes the stakes are very high if you get better at the skill of helping a room of people say yes. And I guess the bigger picture of it is across your career. Another reason why it might be worth the short-term discomfort is across a career you can achieve so much more if you don't shy away from the chance to talk to 10 people or more. It just is easier to make a bigger difference whether or not you aspire to being a leader in our sector.
I totally agree, Rob. And even if I think through the fundraisers I've talked to recently who, when applying for their next job, they've been asked, here's some questions you might need to reflect on. And would you please give a 10-minute presentation on how your strategy might help blah, or what you might do in your first 100 days. And so often that's the bit that people are so worried about. Or if there's a special event and you ask to give a speech, like, it is a skill that has a disproportionate effect, I think, on your confidence and results. Where might you start? I think there's lots of things that people might cover or try first, but where might you start with people to help them begin to change the way they look at this skill or their results? Sure.
Well, that first thing is just being realistic about the signals your body is sending you if you ever have to do a talk. If you're like the rest of us, your heart might beat faster at the thought of doing it or when you have to do it. You might get a bit sweatier and so on. And many of us early in our careers or when we're at school experience this, and we experience the discouragement, the pain signal of this rather than the pleasure signal of this. And we potentially think, oh, well, I don't want to do that again because it's uncomfortable. It's painful. Part of the breakthrough is just seeing it as normal, seeing it as your body caring about doing a good job, and therefore finding a way to do it again in spite of that signal. Now, by all means, do some other things to prepare, but a lot of the time there's bound to be some kind of signal that your body sends you that is normal rather than a thing to be avoided. And sometimes people talk about step outside of your comfort zone. I tend to phrase it slightly differently, say recognize that sometimes we need to take a step to expand our comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely things in your life, dear listener, which were once impossible and or stress inducing. And then you did them first, second or third time, and then they ceased to be uncomfortable. It really, whether it's learning to drive or making a phone call or learning to walk, whatever it might be, the doing of the thing makes it more normal and therefore more comfortable. But initially, the discomfort signals are not necessarily a signal, don't do this. If logically, based on the previous point, you really know you want to, push on, do it in spite of, and before long, the discomfort feelings tend to reduce and you'll start noticing the many upsides, the pleasure things from the progress you're making, like the person who just shared with me the other day of how good it feels that she's done this brave thing. You'll start to notice that the good feelings outweigh the short-term discomfort, and now you've got some momentum and off you go. Hi, it's Rob. Now, one of my favourite things to do is when I get to hear from charities that have done in-house training with Brightspot and are now getting wonderful results for their charities. And one truly exciting partnership that's launched recently is between Bowel Cancer UK and Andrex, which is a 3-year partnership worth £2.3 million to the charity. Recently, my colleague Ben talked to the brilliant Megan Marsden, who is Senior Strategic Partnerships Manager at Bowel Cancer UK. She shared the difference that this Brightspot training has made for her and her team this year.
Doing it has genuinely completely transformed the way that we work as a team. It's transformed our thinking, it's transformed our results. One team member said that since she has submitted applications using the magic formula, she has been successful in achieving donations from all but one of those partners, which is amazing. It's also led to an uplift as well with the confidence to ask for more. One team member specifically, we have a partner that's supported us for a number of years. She, as a result of working with Ben, thought she could ask for more. She did, and we've had the biggest donation to date. And I would say to anyone thinking about spending money on the Brightspot programme, do it. You will not regret it.
If you're curious about exploring the idea of a bespoke team training session for your charity, for instance, our flagship course, Influencing Donors and Supporters, or our next level training packages in corporate partnerships, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services.
I think the first time I ever gave a speech about 13 years ago, I stood in front of 800 people at an event, and I was so nervous. My body was doing exactly what you were describing. I'll never forget my foot wouldn't stop tapping because of the energy and the adrenaline that was flying through. I couldn't sit still. I didn't know, my hands were shaking so much holding the piece of paper. On YouTube, there's a different speech that I gave probably 9 years later, which people often talk about. What an amazing speech you gave, Ben. Gosh, you just were sort of born to do that. No, I worked so hard to improve this skill. I'm really proud of the feeling you get at the end of it. Like, however nervous I was at the beginning 12 years ago, the feeling after giving it was totally different. Rob, I'm interested. One thing you've talked to me quite a lot about is even when thinking through the content I might put into my presentation or what I'm about to say in a speech, often there's a question or some things I'm thinking through that aren't always helpful to make me be my best self or even come up with the best content. Can you help listeners understand a bit about that, if that's okay?
Yes, I think when we are struggling, often at an unconscious level, it's because we've been asking an unhelpful question, a disempowering question, a question that cannot help but freak you out. And I talk about this a little bit in one of the later chapters of my book, The Fundraiser Who Wanted More. But the character in that book, she's doing really well in her fundraising, but she's got to go and give a talk to some other fundraisers about it, and she thinks this is a disaster. She makes progress with her feelings about having to do the talk when she looks at this notion of what question am I asking myself? And she thoughtfully shares with the reader and the other character in the book, the key thing she'd been asking was, how can I not mess it up? And even more unhelpfully, how can I make sure I don't get found out? I really don't know that much about fundraising. And what if they discover that I'm actually a beginner or an amateur, or there's lots of things I don't know the answers to? And if you ask those questions consistently, anyone is going to feel pretty stressed and upset about the idea of doing a talk. They may even put off and find a way to get out of it. Whereas if we can consciously ask ourselves a better question, for instance, what could I do in this talk that would help my audience? Now, you could put more details about it there. Help my audience to feel understood, that I get how tricky finance is in a charity and so on, and potentially see the opportunities about this fundraising proposition that would be good for their team. You could put that extra detail in there if you want, but even if you just keep it really simple and really consistent with the main ethos of the wonderful book called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, which is we tend to be more confident and more resourceful when we're seeking to serve, to give, rather than get. And very early in my career, if there was a question in my head and it wasn't the other two, it would have been, how can I get them to do this thing? How can I get them to agree and say yes to my fundraising project? And even that is at some level trying to potentially manipulate or get someone to do something. I'm not saying show up, be like Santa Claus, do nothing but help everyone else and get nothing in return for fundraising or for your project. But if your primary question is a generous one of giving the other people an interesting and useful 10 minutes of your time, what tends to happen is A, you tend to be a little bit more keen to do it because human beings like to help others. And B, also practically, it helps you start to think of content that is more likely to achieve that objective, that is interesting, entertaining and useful, rather than largely protecting your ego or trying to force your project forwards.
I love that, Rob. And it would change what you put into your presentation and in particular, how you feel about it. I think episode number 92, perhaps, of the podcast of Laura, one of the things she says about winning a huge pitch was while I was writing the content and looking at the structure, there was a moment when I realised we've got this. Even though it was one of the first pitches she'd ever done and she used to be scared of presenting, she says, when I asked the question, how can we help them, the company, the answers were so good. Like, it became clear to me, when we turn up and deliver for these 20 minutes, we are going to help them. And that is going to come across to them. And you notice on the podcast, you can feel her confidence shift. I love the power of this. Often when we do give someone something, you end up getting something as well. It's just human nature. You give, you get. And it doesn't surprise me that works in presenting too. All that being said, Rob, before people present or think about it, they do just get quite nervous or very nervous. And yet I think you've helped me know that there's a bit of a hack to it, some things that can help them. What would you say to someone?
Yes, I love this one to the extent that the TED Talk where you can learn more about it and really feel the progress of it is my favourite TED Talk I've ever seen. The last time I watched it was one of the 3 or 4 most watched TED Talks in history. And it's with a brilliant psychologist called Amy Cuddy. I believe she works at Stanford University, although I might be wrong about that. Anyway, she helped me understand a way of reducing nerves and somewhat increasing confidence for any stressful situation, be it an interview, a big family occasion, or in this case, when you have to do a presentation and you feel getting nervous. Here's what you do. She helps me understand that not only is it true that what state you're in, like happy or angry, affects what your body does, you smile or you frown, the reverse is also true, by which she means if there's a time when you want to feel more confident, by practicing or deliberately doing the body language, the physiology of confidence, while some could say it's false, it's just a trick, you won't fool yourself, Amy Cuddy shows me science that helps me believe that it's true. And then crucially, having watched this TED Talk, I've done it over and over again for years, and it absolutely has helped me, and it's helped hundreds and hundreds of people who've been on my courses who I've mentioned this to. So the key insight is that she noticed that in nature, when animals are victorious and or dominant, they tend to do big body language. If you think about a peacock or a bull elephant or what have you, being big and open and up energy tends to go in the animal kingdom with progress, dominance, and confidence. And she's found the same thing is true of human beings, to the extent that when you win a race, even when small children win a race, invariably, as they cross the line, especially if they cross the line first, their energy tends to go up, their arms tend to go up in the air, and their head looks up. Cuddy says, what if we could deliberately create that kind of body language for ourselves in advance of having to do an important presentation? In the experiment, she got subjects to, just for 2 minutes, assume either a low confidence, low status body position, like sitting down, scrunched up, looking down, hunched over, or some other participants she put for 2 minutes and invited them to be in these bigger postures. When sitting, for their shoulders to be back and their chest to be more up. If standing, to have their hands in the air, their feet shoulder widths apart, and their sternum, again, just half a centimetre, a couple of centimetres higher up than normally they might do. And the interesting thing is, after just 2 minutes, she was able to find out what was going on in them physiologically in terms of their hormones. And she did this with taking a saliva test. And she found that in as little as 2 minutes, the people who'd been doing big, more confident body postures, the hormone testosterone, which is not just a male thing, men and women at their most confident tend to have more testosterone flowing in their system. That confidence hormone was up by at least 20%. And that was achieved in as little as 2 minutes. And also the hormone that's often linked to stress, cortisol, was reduced by up to 25% in these people in as little as 2 minutes. So, dear listener, even if some other things are a struggle and you're trying to give yourself a pep talk to just do a good job or help people today, and you're still struggling, if all you do, you just take 2 or 3 minutes before you have to go and do your talk where no one else can see you, and you just do this, practice this more confident body language quite deliberately with calm, slow, deep breaths, and you allow those breaths to happen, I have found over and over again that it does affect the confidence with which you walk into your opportunity. And over the years, I've had dozens and dozens of people who've fed back to me that they use this now. One of my favorite examples was a high value fundraiser who used to work for a well-known university in the West Country in England. And she got in touch to let me know how it had helped, because the gist of the story is she was meeting a major donor to her university, and he was a lawyer and he was late back from another meeting. So his assistant had apologized on his behalf and asked her to just wait a little longer. And she said, whereas normally she would have started to fret and worry, because she'd watched the Amy Cuddy TED Talk, she quite deliberately walked over to the window and just stood up with her shoulders back and looked out the window calmly and relaxed. And she said she waited for this half hour, for most of the half hour, doing that. And she said, interestingly, it was easier to focus on positive, generous thoughts about the opportunity of meeting this person who cared about her organization, and to choose a better meaning for why he was late, as in, he's just got other things to do. It doesn't mean he doesn't want to give, and he doesn't mean he disrespects me. It doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't like supporting our university, which are all thoughts which could have occurred to her had she been in a less resourceful state. Anyway, long story short, he eventually arrived for the meeting. Actually, it didn't start well because he was a bit stressed and a bit blunt, but a powerful thing about this body language stuff, if you practice it, is, interestingly, in some separate studies, Amy Cuddy found it actually makes you a better listener. The confidence you have makes you feel less threatened, and therefore makes it easier for you to not react, but to calmly choose how to respond. And she said she responded to the early blunt things with curiosity and being interested in him as to why he said those things. Anyway, long story short, by the end of the meeting, they went on to talk about some really quite interesting things. And she ended up being able to invite him to make a donation to the university for an entirely different topic than she had planned, because she had done that curiosity and better listening. And she fed back to me that she really, although on paper she knows that good fundraisers are good listeners, in practice, she felt that would have been much harder to do if she had not chosen to control her body language and her state, and therefore her confidence, in this way when she first heard that the donor was going to be late to the meeting.
I love that story, Rob. And just next to me is Amy Cuddy's book, Presence, where she goes into detail on the impact of things like power posing. And you're absolutely right. That shift in chemical balance of testosterone, it's not just about confidence. It's about making you more present in that moment, more aware, more likely to listen. And so I totally see how a major donor just before their trickiest meeting could do with more of that skill. And listener, I can see why just before a presentation, those nerves you think will never go away, I can see why doing this act will help you. And I know that at many times it's helped fundraisers and others. Yes, if I were you, I would Google Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on why your body language can shape who you become.
Yeah, and interestingly, as one's comfort zone expands, one feels less of the discomfort and the stressful feelings going on in our body. But still, it's valuable to practice these sorts of things. I pay attention to what I'm doing with my body before I do talks, even though I've done hundreds of them before. And I just remember just a week or two ago, Ben, you shared with me that there was a particular, especially large conference where you were doing the closing keynote at a big conference. And even though you've spent the last 5, 6, 7 years doing lots of these presentations, something about that international audience and the size of the audience caused your brain to make you feel more nervous than you normally would. And the antidote wasn't giving yourself a pep talk. It was quite deliberately going and doing this Amy Cuddy power pose before the talk where no one could see you. And it did the trick, and it helped you not only go out and really enjoy it at your best, but the punchline I liked of that story is that clearly you'd done something right, because they immediately then invited you back to do the keynote at next year's conference as well. So wherever our listeners are in their career, be aware that sometimes nerves can hit you, and this is one of the most valuable tools I've ever learned in 25 years since studying things that can help fundraisers raise more money and enjoy raising more money. I'm really conscious of time, Ben. There are some more ideas I'd love to share to help people prepare their presentations in terms of the kind of substance that would win the day and help your audience happily say yes to whatever you're talking about, but we won't fit it in today. Let's do a part 2 to this same topic another time. For now, Ben, thanks ever so much for coming along and hosting this chat with me. I look forward to catching up with you for part 2 very soon. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you found our ideas helpful. Clearly, there's more to presenting effectively than what we've been able to cover in one short episode. So we're going to create that second part very soon. Now, if you're involved in organising a conference or a department away day, and you're looking for a keynote speaker who can entertain, change the way people feel, and help them want to do things differently, Ben and I absolutely love to share our bright spot strategies with a large room full of fundraisers. If you'd like to talk it through, just drop us a line at brightspotfundraising.co.uk. As usual, we'll put a summary in the episode notes on the podcast section of the website. Now, I know there's a good chance that you've already subscribed to our show, but if not, do click that button now. You'll get instant access to hundreds more techniques and stories to help you with your fundraising, and you'll be set up to automatically receive the next one to help you improve your presentation skills. If you found today's show helpful, please don't keep quiet about it. I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share it on with your friends, your colleagues, and on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your help spreading the word so that we can help as many good causes as possible. Do let Ben and I know what you think about the episode. We are both on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening and supporting our show. Good luck with your fundraising and your ongoing efforts to improve your skills. I do know that keeping going is not easy, especially when you're busy, but it really is ultimately what makes the biggest difference. Until the next time, bye-bye.